Good Monday morning. As we celebrate this Labor Day and we rest from our labors, we have a great story of the parents of Samson. Before we get to Samson himself, I just want to take a moment and pause and talk a little bit about Manoah. In chapter 13 of Judges, we are introduced to Manoah. Now, Manoah is from Zorah, which is in the foothills of Dan. It's kind of this elite border town. This town is filled with people who are incredibly faithful and often are chosen to be priests and keepers and servers of God. And so Manoah is an interesting character that comes from a location that we so often don't talk about because it's one of those outskirt areas of elitism. But he is a pure man. He's a good man. He and his wife are married for a long time, and she is barren. She cannot have children. We read right away in chapter 13 that an angel of the Lord comes to the woman and speaks to her, says, "You are going to have a son. Now, while you're pregnant, you are not to eat or drink anything of the vine. You're supposed to be pure. And when your son is born, you're going to raise him as something we call a Nazarite. You're going to not cut his hair. He's never going to have anything from the vine. So no strong drink, no wine. This is out of the norm for this time. It's out of the norm for this time for two reasons. The first most practical reason, and this carries on through centuries. I mean, this is why Luther brewed beer, right? The water was not always safe to drink. So a fermented drink meant that you were purifying the water. It also made for alcohol, which didn't always bode well for people's decisions and choices they made. But there was a safety in that. And then there was a luxury in that. Fermented water, that of wine or beer, you could somewhat escape from the reality. It would make you feel good from a very hard life you were living. That second reason, I think, still is the case for many people today, which is why we get ourselves into trouble. But regardless, when we are in chapter 13 of Judges, we are introduced to Manoah. So the woman, his wife, who is unnamed, she has an angel of the Lord appear to her, but she doesn't know it's an angel of the Lord. She just says, "A man has come to me and has said, I am going to have a child. And I'm not only going to have a child, but while I'm pregnant, I have to be very careful with what I do. I'm not to eat or drink anything of the vine. And then also, when the baby's born, the baby is to be raised in such a way." So Manoah hears this, and he wants to have a conversation with this man. He wants to get all of the details right. Today, we use funny terms to somewhat make fun of how we live as a society, how we separate ourselves as a society. I think the term here is mansplaining, right? He wants to explain it to his wife. So he wants to hear firsthand from the man, from the angel that he does not know is an angel. So the second time the angel comes to his wife, she's in the field, so she runs and gets her husband. They come back, and there's kind of this funny interaction with Manoah and the angel that he is not aware of. In chapter 13, verses 8 through pretty much through 23, we have this exchange of Manoah asking specifically everything that the man had told to his wife. So he repeats it. The man says, "You shall not have your wife drink or eat from the vine, and the boy's rule of life shall be different than every other boy's rule of life. And she is to observe everything that I have commanded." If you look closely at this text, one thing you will notice is this interaction is between the angel and Manoah's wife. Manoah wants to take hold of this and maybe even control it a little bit. But this interaction is specifically, if she does what I have told her, this blessing will be upon her. They both are blessed to have a son. As we've often discussed in ancient Israel times, in ancient Israel and ancient times, to have a child, especially a son, was really your security in the future. Think of it as your social security, because you had a child that you could have marry and produce more offspring. And so this was a big deal for Manoah. But the interaction, the transaction, is between God and his wife. She is to bear a son. She is to keep this order. And if she does so, the child will prosper. So Manoah wants to extend hospitality. Nothing I've said here is meant to be, it's not a good, bad distinction. It's not a negative. It's just kind of a funny way of reading into the interactions. Manoah wants to extend hospitality because he sees this man before him, and this is a hospitality culture. And so he wants to kill a kid, a little goat, for them to share and eat. He wants to offer grain offering, and the man says, not to me, you offer it to the Lord. Offer it as a burnt offering. And then Manoah says once again, well, what is your name then? What is your name so we may truly honor you when all of this comes to be? And in verse 18, it's the best response. But the angel of the Lord said, why do you ask my name? It is too wonderful. Isn't that amazing? It's too wonderful. The names of the angels are too wonderful to say out loud by our human tongues. So Manoah offers this offering to the Lord. He offers it on the rock, which is an altar, right? He offers the kid, he offers the grain, and as the smoke is ascending to heaven, the man essentially is taken up in it, which reveals that he is an angel. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to, because at the end of the story, it is Manoah and his wife's reaction to the angel that I think is pretty significant. In verse 21, it says, the angel of the Lord did not appear again to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah realized that it was an angel of the Lord, and Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. See, there's this perception, and it carries back from the wandering in the wilderness. You have to remember this is an oral transition, an oral culture, so they're constantly reliving the stories of old as if it is their story. And there was this perception that if you gazed upon the Lord, you would die. It is that fear and trembling that we so often talk about. What the failure of translation is that to gaze upon the Lord without understanding, to gaze upon the Lord without respect, in that time and in that place led to certain death. But see, God, from the beginning to the end, will go out of his way to show us that it's not gazing upon him that causes death. It's our own sinful brokenness that causes death. To look upon the Lord is actually to receive life. And so Manoah says to his wife, we are surely going to die. We have seen the Lord. And then his wife says this, but the wife said to him, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. If God really meant harm for us, would God toy with us? Would God receive this offering and then smite us? If God really was that kind of God, would God really bless us with a son? The end of the chapter 13, is the woman bore a son and named him Samson. And the child grew and blessed the Lord. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir. And that's the beauty of the end of this passage. For the last 30 seconds, I just want to focus on, in your life, do you worship a God that you truly believe is out to get you? Do you worship a God that you are certain you're just waiting for him to realize what a terrible person you are and to smite you? Do you worship a God and do you receive the abundance of God waiting for the other foot to drop? See, too often in our lives, I worry that is the underlying nature of our faith. But that isn't a God who comes to us, who sends messengers and voices to speak into us. That isn't a God who loves us, who gives us abundance, who creates life within us. That isn't the God that we read of in his word. That is a God of our own understanding. Manoah and his wife remind us that too often we can relate to him. We can relate to the sense of waiting for God to rain judgment on us, when really We should be waiting to celebrate God's goodness each and every day because God is at work in your life and in mine and in the rest of the world. Have a great Labor Day.